All right, folks, welcome to the Team VTAC podcast. I figured I better turn this thing on quickly here because my guest, old Mike here, and I are having some good conversations, and I don't want you guys to miss out what's going on. First of all, Mike Rogers, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Welcome back to Crusader Acres.
With pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. Thank you.
He is what we in the business call a cheese weasel. So in the Army, remember what a cheese weasel was? Cheese eater? Well, they can't hear you shake your head.
No,
okay, we're on a podcast, bro. Come on.
I want to hear your definition of a cheese eater because I'm sure.
Well, so when a dude shows up at your house in the morning and he brings Diet Coke and Reese's to your wife, how should I take that?
Got a great sense of coming to the right place. You know,
Yeah.
he knows
So
what
the
he's
last time you showed up, you had bacon.
doing. Well, you told me that story about, and like the thing that makes you most happy is hunting with your grandson eating bacon.
There you go.
So
yeah, my grandson and I were walking. I go, so what's going on, Denver? And he goes, Grandpa, I just realized I really like to shoot guns and eat bacon. And I'm like, that's funny. You should mention that. Yeah, because I feel the same way. So
you're raising him right.
And he doesn't get bacon very much when he's hanging out with his mom.
We had bacon this morning.
We had bacon and eggs again this morning. Homegrown eggs, and bacon's not homegrown, but it's pretty doggone good. Alan Elischwitz, the knife dude, He showed up and actually I showed up at his place and he had made me bacon. He made the bacon, him and his wife. It was amazing. So he sent like 4 or 5 pounds of this stuff home with me, and Melinda cooked it up. It just was.
Does he live in Tennessee?
No, he lives in Texas, but yeah, that's a good dude to have as a friend. So he can make you a knife and bacon.
Wow, that's pretty manly. I can't do any of those things.
So I want to tell everybody kind of how this came about. So you and I are pretty good friends, and you're
despite being a weirdo. Yeah, we're good friends.
Well, we're both a little weird. I mean, you know that. You're just a little bit behind me in the weirdness. You're catching up quickly though. So your background was as a ranger.
Yep.
And you and I met. We met at West Point. When I met you, I didn't say it, but I'm like, this guy is all jacked up. He's going to be an awesome officer. Contrary to some of the other folks that I met when I was up there with you, who I was like, oh, they're going to be perfect. They're going to just be a dirtbag.
They're going to ascend the ranks very quickly.
Dirtbag is too nice for them. You know what I mean? They were just they're going to be self-serving O's that nobody's going to want to follow. And man, I called it right because you had success. You're a wild man, and I think that's,
Well, it's funny. When I got to special operations, I think I told you this before, when you get in trouble at West Point, you get assigned like punishment hours. So you basically walk outside on all your free time. All the people I was doing that with are the guys I found in special operations that were all very successful. So, and the ones that were getting straight A's were not the ones being successful in that world.
Yeah. That's something we need to remember. We cannot forget that as military people, and raising dudes and gals to be leaders in the military, whether it's your local ROTC or it's West Point. Man, we can't forget that, because he who dares wins, right? I think somebody famous quoted that.
Yep. They just came up with a study up at West Point to like, what is going to make someone successful in the military? So they were looking at, is it grades? Is it military training? Is it physical fitness? They came up with grit was the one thing that was going to make people successful, which I thought was a pretty cool, way of looking at what's going to make someone successful after they graduate.
Are you familiar with Colonel Oslin?
I know the name. Yep.
He's a guy I've been reading a lot about lately with some of the different books that I've read.
He's over in Google now. He was like a deputy commander in the regiment when I was there.
Unbelievable dude. You want to talk about a guy with grit, and a guy where the system treated him poorly because of his grit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's sad sometimes when that happens. But anyway, so we're on the phone, we're talking, and we started talking about some of the folks that you were hiring or firing from your business, and I was really intrigued. Can you kind of just kind of give us the one over the world of your thought process, and not just yours, but your partner in crime, Ethan Killeen, he's not here to defend himself, so we could talk all kinds
Absolutely,
of smack about him. You guys have been, you both were on the podcast before we talked about your business, and we better hit on that first. So tell me a quick about your business.
So we took a mapping technique out of special operations that was used to plan all the night raids, and we converted it for domestic purposes. And as we brought that home, we very quickly realized that all the blueprints and building schematics across the country are inaccurate and not accessible for first responders. So we set out to solve that problem. And as we started to grow the business, very quickly realized needed more people we could trust. So I reached back into the community I came from and started hiring individuals out of there, which is one of their main parts of success.
So CRG.
Yep.
And if we want to find you real quick, how do we do that?
crgplans.com.
Right. So get back on track there. So you start hiring dudes. You started realizing.
Well, it was all really opportunistic. When I first met Ethan, who I started the business with, when I was with him in the Ranger Regiment, we were a platoon leader, platoon sergeant pair. So like the mommy daddy pair for about 60 Rangers. And I always said, and I had no desire to start a business, but I always said if I was going to try to put someone on the moon or collect trash, I would do it with Ethan because he was so systems oriented and just a great human being that's who I'd want to do it with. So I had the opportunity.
What do you mean when you say systems oriented? What does that mean to you?
He can build, and he's so organized and can build like the back end he's built the back end of our company. Now he had no technical background, but he was able to teach himself that. And when you look at the way that we're organized, because we manage very complex problem sets, like we're mapping all the Molson Coors distilleries across the country. They're in 20 different states. So how do you get people there, collect the schematics, fix everything? There's just got to be logistically a system in place to put people on the ground, manage it all. So Ethan kind of built out the back end of that.
So building out the back end of it is those people that he's dealing with are not from our background.
Not at all. But I think when you look at like the culture of the Ranger Regiment, one of the things that makes us special is, every couple months we're getting new privates in. And, they kind of get absorbed into this culture where, Ethan, had 8 or 9 deployments. So they just, so much overseas time, they learn all these things. And now you have this very professional organization that gets a new person. Now, how do you bring them up to speed so they're not a liability? How do you train them so they're the next generation? And Ranger Regiment does that all the time. And we've taken that to our business where, Ethan recruits someone on the team. He's got this super professional group of people making maps. How do you bring them in the team very quickly, make them, produce, train them, and still keep the machine running down the tracks and develop them to be the next, level of leadership in the company?
And so how many people are there on the backside?
40 people total in the business, about 25 are on the backside. And Ethan, he runs a cartography shop. And actually my wife does an amazing job. She runs the operations section for the company. So she's really the one who organizes, putting people on the ground. And then it's Ethan and my wife that are plugging in, how do we, everything from receiving the purchase order to, getting that thing out the door. It's, there's multiple different steps in that process. So we've organized everything from a business management perspective. And, we made it really simple though. Like if you look at our sales pipeline and our systems, a lot of it's like slang that we've built. Like we have a column for verbal purchase orders. So it's just, kind of very custom fit to us, but it's built out and works really well.
So as with most businesses, maybe I'm wrong, but you can correct me if I get this out of whack. I would say most businesses that have just amazing products. Product isn't, it's easy to have a great product. It's hard to sell a great product. Would you agree with that?
I agree very much so. And to scale a great product. And I think that our value really is the back end of the organization. And people that try to compete with us, they step in and they just realize very quickly how difficult it is to do what we do.
Okay, so you say the value of your business is the back end, which makes sense because if you didn't have the product, you'd have nothing to sell. If you didn't have Ethan and the band of
the band of misfits,
the band of misfit warriors back there doing their thing, and that's the other thing. We're going to talk about how the military selection process, use that to select the people that are your salespeople that are out there on the ground. But on the backside of it, you don't use the same parameters to hire those people, right?
No, we select very differently for this. We hire for the job. So what we realized, if I was trying to teach you and I how to make a map, it would not go well. And we did that initially where we were hiring, military and retired law enforcement to do that work, and we were just not as successful as we needed to be. So that's when we pivoted and said, okay, what is the skill set we need? Let's go find that. And we put our office literally right next to the college that had that skill set, which gave us like great access to great people. And we recruited just for that.
Look back at your time in the military, and I say this a lot, and people probably think I'm making it up, but the support structure, by support structure, I'm talking about every person that's not on the pointy end of that stick is a support structure for your unit. So in our unit, we had medics. You didn't have to worry about anything because we had not just the medics that are deploying with you, but we had medics in the rear that were taking care of you and your family, and it gave you peace of mind, but it also, you could go and get treated. If you need to get treated, you didn't have to leave the compound. You could
Absolutely
go there. We had finance people. You never had pay problems because guess what? Finance was 50 yards away. Yep. You could walk up there and look the person in the face. They knew you. They're not, some person at the other end of the phone that doesn't know you. They'd square your finances away. We had the best cooks. I'm going to say best cooks in the Army. People can debate me, whatever they want, but I'm telling you, those jokers, men and women that put together the chow hall
well, who knows what the number is, but how many people does it take to put that one person at the pointy end of the stick?
Right, yeah.
And there's 20 people to put that one person there to do their thing, and they can't do it without everybody standing next to them. And that's our business is the same way. I have an individual who's out there selling, training, implementing. He or she did not do all the work to get them there. They're the one who's executing on it, and they execute very well. But there's this extremely well-developed support structure to put them there.
So when we had this discussion, you talked about your selection process for hiring these guys. Walk me through that, how you used their military background / all the selection they've already been through to select them for your business.
And it's continually evolving as I'm looking at how we're hiring, and it gets better. Like we just hired a gentleman out of 3rd Special Forces Group to Virginia, starts like in 2 weeks. He's actually came off of Jason Casper's team. So, Jason said, hey, just talk to this cat. It wasn't like a job interview. He's looking at his options for getting out, and I had been transitioned in the world for a little bit. And I do a lot of that type of stuff, just always talking to guys like, hey, what makes you happy? And through that, developed a relationship with him. And but as I was talking to Jason about it, he's a great guy. And Jason's word to me is more than anything. But I also reached out to his senior non-commissioned officer, this guy JB, who's also a great dude. And I have found that in 30 seconds to talking to the senior non-commissioned officer who was responsible for them, if it's a good or bad person. And it's real quick. Are they a good person? Do they work hard? Would you hire them if you were in my position? And 9 times out of 10, you'll get in 10 seconds, you'll get a very yes or no answer. So we've been able to use all their prior selection processes to really kind of identify who's important to us. But we also have a bunch of other questions that are important to me that I've developed over time I'm looking for. So the first thing I'm always asking somebody is, I want to know about their family. What are your priorities? Is your family a priority? Are you a good husband or wife? Are you a good father, mother? Because I think if you have those priorities wrong, you're going to have a very difficult time transitioning out. You might be great at your job, but there's going to be other things that are going to make you less successful downstream.
Don't you think that also comes with some maturity?
What do you mean by that?
Like, don't you believe that as you mature, you get importance of
Absolutely
of the people in your life in the right sequence?
Yep. I look at myself when I was younger, a young 20-year-old person, to what I am now. I am very different today than I was back then. And I think it's because my priorities have been super aligned. Remember the first time I held my oldest daughter, my life changed immediately, and I was able to carry that forward into lots of different things. And that's what I'm looking for, someone who is mature enough to understand the importance of that responsibility. Because if you can get that right, we can build on from there. So
how do we get, said you call their previous leadership. And what bothers me about business is why don't people have that due diligence? So I'll go to the SHOT Show and I'll see a dude that I know just got fired because he was a douchebag from one company, and now he's over there working for another company like everything's cool. And it's like,
well, I think a lot of times people, from a military perspective, they don't have the ability to reach back into the world and know the type of questions to ask, where I can call and have that conversation that another business might not be able to do. And it's also, you know it better than anybody, being able to validate.
Yeah, let me interrupt you there though. So, okay, I get that, but let's say I'm a dude and let's say I'm working for SIG.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy comes to me, he wants this job, guy or gal. I go, okay, I don't know them. Why do we not? Okay, first of all, why don't you call their previous leadership? Because I can't understand how you could call them and they would say, yeah, we let this guy go. Okay, well, that means he got fired. Okay, well, why'd you let him go?
Yeah,
and then why do they not be honest enough to tell you? Because why would you, as a business person, want to get rid of somebody and then have them to go destroy somebody else's business? And it happens. I'm telling you,
all the time.
This happens all the time. It drives me insane. Like, did you not make 2 phone calls to find out that this guy couldn't find his butt with both hands? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I like the fact that the military.
But we apply that with our other people in the business as well. So the technical staff, we're talking to their professors, we're getting recommendations, because we're really, culture to me is extremely important. As soon as you plug one bad person in, that's bad for the entire team, because now you're dealing with things downstream. And we work really hard, we work really fast. So it's about finding that right, person for the specific, job that we need.
Okay, so I interrupted you there. You were headed down the path. Continue where you were. You called, you get the feedback from those folks. What's the next step?
So we will bring them in. So in the example of Josh, brought him in up to New Jersey. So he's down at Fort Bragg, brought him up.
He's the third group guy?
Third group dude, yeah. He's an 18. I think he's a Charlie. No, he's an Echo. He's a comms guy. So he's actually...
got to be a good guy.
Yeah, he's a great dude.
Comms guys are always
super
the best.
competent. He knows how to turn the computer on. Just a good guy. But brought him up and wanted to make him part of our family real quick. So he's hanging out with literally my family. So he sees the human aspect of who we are and kind of how we relate to each other. And then one of the big things I'll do is I'll take him out for a couple beers, a couple times. Really, that's a test. When I'm on my first beer, are you on your 7th beer? And when you have 2 beers, you go down a path that you can just tell that this. It's not going to be the correct fit for like a professional aspect within the company. So we'll do little tests like that. We will bring him into the office, and he'll spend a lot of time with Ethan. He'll spend a lot of time with Alex, who's the COO at a MARSOC. But prior to that, I will have him contact all the salespeople on our team. All the sales or implementation are all former military, and they're just kind of doing some teaching, training, answering his questions. But it's really a mini interview. And then after he's talked to all those different people, I'm circling back to my team, like. How did he interact with you? Is you could fit here culture? So I'm taking lots of feedback from the crew, and then it'll just be I'll get a bunch of thumbs up, and we'll pull the trigger.
So, how many guys are former Rangers?
Right now, there's only 2 of us, only Ethan and I. There's 5 MARSOC dudes, which is very upsetting.
So, why the MARSOC guys?
Well, the first individual I met at that community was Alex Carney. So he was an opportunistic hire. His mentor and my father are very good friends. So he was still in the military. He didn't know what he wanted to do. He just come back from one of multiple deployments he was on. And him and I got together for a cup of coffee. And I was talking about my transition. And this was very early on in the business. We had no cash. We were bootstrapping everything. But as soon as I met him, I was like, he's just a special human being who could be put into some complex environments. And as a Marine, I think a lot of times, those guys are really good at working with minimal resources. So in the startup environment, that was, really good for us. And ultimately developed this great relationship with Alex, brought him on, and, he moved his family across the country on a handshake. But then as Alex started to become real successful and we started to scale, okay, we need somebody else. And Alex went and touched his when he was the executive officer, he had a team leader, this guy, Joe Hansen, who we put out into Wisconsin. And then Joe brought his guy on. So we've literally recruited out of the same team at a MARSOC off the West Coast. So which I think is really cool for the culture is if individuals are telling their buddies about us and wanting to bring them on, that's a sign that we're doing something right.
So how many of those first couple guys were O's?
Like a mix. O's. Yeah, it was
Okay,
2
okay.
O's, and then there was an NCO, and now and then we hired another NCO. Josh is an NCO. So I'd say we're heavier. There's definitely more NCOs than there are O's. But we're like looking for O3s, O4s, E6s to E8, kind of at that 10-year mark in the military is where the kind of the current shot group is.
So you said these guys are they have the ability to get stuff done without a lot of resources. So that, to me, that's one of the things I noticed when I left the unit and I went back to regular SF, of how poorly resourced those guys were, but how their resource is they can make anything happen.
Absolutely.
They might be stealing, but hey, if they're getting it done,
they're
right?
solving the problem.
Yeah, they're solving the problem. Whereas the guys in the unit, I'm not saying the guys in the unit or Rangers are not problem solvers, but you know as well as I know, in Ranger Battalion and in the unit, you've got everything you need at your fingertips.
Absolutely.
So that you can focus on your mission. Although I do feel that when I went back to SF, it allowed me to really get the feel like you can really be a problem solver, because you're talking to people that are so far outside of your lane. Because if you don't know how to talk to them, you can't get anything done. And we see that around the world. If you send a guy that came from Ranger Battalion, came to the unit, and you go out to have him brief somebody at a consulate or at an embassy, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you really don't.
True story. Yeah.
Whereas if you take an SF dude and you send him out, pretty much you kind of know what you're going to get.
Absolutely. And I think we rely very heavily on the different cultures within special operations. So as you look at Ethan and I, we've built more of like the business, the hard structure. But when you look at the MARSOC, the Green Berets, one of the biggest things is like village stability operations. They're used to going and building out networks, building a team, and then going and conquering it in a specific region. And that's really our whole model. So that's where these guys are great. And, you talk about solving problems. Alex, as an example, first day, a couple funny stories about him, but one of the first days at the company when we were really scaling, we took a little bit of money from a great investor, and we needed to go hire map makers. So like on a whim, I was like, Alex, we need 4 dudes. That was the level of guidance I gave him. Yeah. And then next day I came in and there's 4 individuals standing in our office. Like, who are they? Like, oh, they're our first 4 cartographers. Oh, where do they come from? Like the local high school or local college. Is again, we have an internship program established with them. Like he just took it of his own accord, did what he had to do, and did a great job. 3 of those individuals are still working with us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one just left for a great opportunity. Super happy for him. But those are the types of problems that you can just count on Alex or any one of the individuals. I was in Wisconsin last week with this guy Joe Hansen, and it's awesome to see. We put him out there, and we did a lot of business development, get the region ready, put him in there, and he just totally ran onto it. So I was out there at the Chiefs conference, and to see the network, people just genuinely really like him, and he's doing great things. He's doing a lot of leadership instruction out there. He's integrating with the different tactical teams, just taking a lot of his lessons, a lot more than just mapping, but he's out there kind of giving back to the community.
So you had a lot of, I don't know, you gave me the best podcast prep notes that I've ever gotten. You sent me
last time I wasn't prepared. So
5 pages of notes. And how do you want to hit this? Because there's so many amazing, you want me to hit it and then you expand on it?
Yeah, sure.
So one of your headings here, it says traits of the SOF members that are going to excel in the private sector. Okay. Humble confidence.
So humble confidence is a term I came up with. So I had, at one point in my career, was teaching military science at Princeton and the College of New Jersey, and trying to explain to new cadets like who you should be. And I came up with the term humble confidence. And that was something I learned from you on the range, where you truly are confident, your trait, you're better than it, but you're not boastful, you're not arrogant. And I think that one of the things, and a guy who's the president of our company, Phil Coyne, said that about, the individuals we hire, is that they're kind of soft-spoken. They're able to go into a room and just command the room with just being confident in who they are, but very humble. And that's how every time I hear you introduce yourself, you're just a military guy. And then people get to know who you are, and they realize you're a little bit more than that. That's just who you are, and that's who we're looking to hire, because I think that's who's successful.
Okay, what about not afraid to make a decision? Or a mistake?
And only thing worse than a bad decision is no decision at all. So a great example there would be Alex Carney, we got, again, that COO of the MARSOC, I think literally the first day of his employment, I was at a conference, and I was like, hey, you need to go up. I scored some free office furniture up in some place up in the city. So go get a U-Haul and go figure it out. And I hooked him up with my brother-in-law, sent him up there, and it was like these old school cubicles with probably had 5,000 bolts. So and the building's being torn down, so he came back really not in a good mood. And he throws all the stuff in the back of the U-Haul, and he's driving back. I call him like, hey, man, did you get all the furniture we need? He goes, dude, the only thing worse than a bad decision is continuing with the bad decision. So, no, I got rid of all of it. We're not going to use it. I was like, that's awesome. You made a decision. I didn't need to push you in that direction. And I think that's a really important thing that I learned from some of the leaders I had in the military that empowered me to make a decision at my altitude. We try to do the same thing with us, because if everyone's waiting for me to make a decision, we're not doing a lot of things.
Yeah. What about, professional problem solving?
I think we were already touching on it, but like the SF cats, they are so good at working in a complex environment and just accomplishing the mission no matter what is required to get them there. And with limited tools, like if you only gave them a hammer, they're still going to build a house. Don't know how, but they would figure out a way to do that. And I think a lot of times that's where we see with our crews, we'll give them very complex things, left and right limits, some resources, and they come back with what they need to be successful.
And once again, this is stuff they learned in the military.
Absolutely.
Flexibility.
Yeah, that speaks for itself. Great Mike Tyson quote about, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think that's so true in business. You can't continue to, fight the problem. When you look at what our country has just gone through, the world rather, with, COVID and the world shutting down, you have to be flexible through those environments, and our team can really do that.
This next one really hits home for me. Their foundation is built different.
I think hard times and hard things make hard people. And I think the startup world is difficult, very difficult in the beginning, and scaling a business is very difficult. And I think they're just, harder. But as you look at, being shot at, in my opinion, recalibrates how you should be able to handle stress. And I think that's really important. I think the selection process that they're going through, when we're hiring, I don't really care if you went to college or not. That's great. But I'm looking at, what type of, how physically demanding has your career been? How, what level did you get to? How'd you perform in those conditions? And you can talk to different people that are, from their units and really get a sense of how somebody is very quickly.
So you said how physically demanding. What about mentally demanding? I mean, or is that just kind of go?
I think that it goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that you wrote on this, your notes are amazing, by the way. Sometimes things suck.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
The military will, sometimes things aren't cool and they suck. And sometimes in business and life, things aren't cool. And if you survived in that world for a while, I know that you're coming from an environment where sometimes you're going to get wet and be cold and everything's going to be okay the next day. So we're not really, again, that's just a foundational thing that I don't know if someone coming out of you go to college for 4 years, you're hanging out, and now, you don't necessarily, you've not been in this environment of things are going to be bad at some point.
The last, well, I guess it's not the last, but the next one, work ethic, that really speaks to me as well. Can you dig into that a little bit? The work ethic of the folks that you're, and what I want you people to understand is these are military folks that we know they have most of this because of where they came from. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're letting the military selection process be part of your process. And I guess that's where I'm really going with this. I'm not saying you shouldn't hire, those young folks out of college. Hey, if they're the right people, hire them. That's awesome. And if you're a stepping stone for them to do a great job for you, and then they move on, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for somebody who has already been through a selection process, which is a hiring or firing process, you've already got it because you know what they've been through. You know what the gates are that they've went through to get where they were at in the military.
Yeah, and they're a high drive individual. And I think that's one of the things I take the most pride in with our company is being able to take someone out of that world and refocus that energy to go do really good things. And that's one of our secrets to success. And that's, to your point, I have more people that have that extreme technical background, and we hire them because that's exactly the person we need to scale that portion of the business. And then I hire these other people to do this other difficult thing, growing a business. And
So talk about that work ethic that they have.
in the military, there is no such thing as a 9 to 5. At least that was not my experience in the military at any point. And
Well, in the Air Force, they have that. They stick with that.
yeah, it's like I don't even know if they do that really.
10 to 4, I think it is.
Yeah, 10 to lunch with a late lunch.
2-hour lunch.
Yeah. Man, that's difficult. That's why we don't have any Air Force people on the team, oddly enough. Or SEALs. We have a strict no Navy SEAL policy. I'll talk on that later. But the work ethic, and again, that Phil Coyne, the president, he talks about how we just look at the world differently. Like there is no such thing as a 9 to 5. Like it's until the mission's complete. I work 18 hours a day some days, most days, because that's just what has to be done. But I talked to our guy out in Texas, Lee Culpepper, great dude, Marsaw cat. I called him the other night at 7:00 because they just had a baby boy a couple weeks ago. So I call him to check on the kid, and he's driving to a demo for the next day. And I didn't know that at all, but he was just, of his own accord, moving out and doing what he had to do.
That kind of leads into the next comment that you made, which was understanding your priorities of work, time management. You have to be able to backwards plan, which that sounds, when I say that, it almost seems humorous to me. Mm-hmm. Like, how could people not figure that out?
Yeah, it's common sense. You would think it's common sense, but
it's not. Yeah. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
So
just setting priorities. The military taught, actually the thing that taught me that the most was West Point, was time management. Because academically, to say I struggled up there is an understatement. And I just had it was just crisis management every moment of my time there for 4 years to make sure I could get the things done when they needed to be done. But a lot of the guys coming out have that trait and skill set, so they can rack and stack the priorities and just go get it. And also setting a plan, working towards it. They're great at that stuff. And we'll help them because there's some things you got to tweak, and we can talk about how we help transition them out of certain mindsets of the military to make them successful in the civilian sector.
So in the military, you make a quote, or you make a reference here, 5th principle of patrolling.
Common sense. Common sense should apply most times.
Okay, so tell me about how your mentality with putting everything in the perspective of the military, kind of go through those steps. Like, how does that? And this isn't for me and for you, because I think we haven't completely figured it out, but what we've figured out is that you don't realize how much you know in the military. You just don't know how much that applies to just having a regular job.
Well, I think it's built into the fabric of who you are. If you work hard in the military, most likely you're going to work hard in the civilian sector. If you're really honest in what you say means in the military, because that's really important, you're going to carry that forward into the private sector. And,
Yeah, but you talk about patrolling.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me how you would do that. Tell me how, if you're in the military and you're planning a patrol, go through that process.
The 5 steps of the operations order, and you lay it out, and you step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the common sense piece is what I think carries over. That is not so common in. And I think that's we talk about a startup in general. I look at it from, if we don't have a lot of money to spend, we can't spend a lot of money. And I talk to other startups, and it's like a badge of honor to be spending a lot more money than you're making. Like, to me, that's not common sense. Like, you should be doing things at the pace you can do them. You have to, of course, take risks, but mitigate risk when you can mitigate the risk. So a lot of the guys that we bring out, they understand that, like the importance of applying common sense, being who they need to be when they go into a room and educating people on what we do.
Well, every MBA student that I've talked to, every single one, and now it's not a lot, but we're talking at least a half dozen here, and every one of them, what they were learning in that MBA program was absolutely 100% wrong for what it's like to really run a business.
And I had people in the beginning.
Or let me rephrase that. To be successful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had people, like a gentleman who had an MBA who was helping us in the beginning of our business, and a lot of advice that he would give, like, dude, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like the price you're talking about, we're losing money on that. Oh no, it'll work itself out in the end. No, it won't. Like the business dies if what you're selling is not making money.
Yeah.
That's not common sense. And I think that's how we just, try to approach, whatever problem set it is that we're looking at in the world. Like we're talking right now about getting more office space, new office space, but with the whole new, remote work culture that's out in the world, okay, that now needs to be factored into this decision and apply common sense.
Well, you're making my day, man. Here's a comment that you said that I guess it kind of, it speaks well to the professional veteran, not being too far gone or shot out.
It's very unfortunate, but you see that sometimes when I'm, interviewing someone through the process, and if within 10 seconds of meeting you, or it's the first time they're meeting someone else in the company that doesn't have a military background, and they're talking about some crazy operation that they were on, that's not what we're looking for. We have that culture where we talk about that stuff in the business, but Ethan's the best example of it. No one's done more stuff than Ethan that I personally know. You would never.
His story is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. But he's the most humble, down to earth, and you would just never know that. Now, you will learn that after you've been around him for a year, but it's not because he's out there talking about it. It's just part of his fabric, who he is. And we see that with a lot of guys that we interview. Unfortunately, that they're too forward leaning with that. And it's like, because we also walk this very delicate line in the company. We're selling to schools, educational institutions, hospitals, private sector, and then the individuals who use the maps are public safety. And those two worlds don't always align. So it's how do you play in both of those worlds? And again, applying common sense and being successful, you got to be successful in both of those worlds, which is difficult.
Well, if you walk into a room, you and Ethan are going to dominate that room, and you don't have to tell them you're military.
Never.
They're just going to be like, wow, these guys are squared away. They're sharp. They're confident. They're competent about what they're doing. They're good. All of this stuff's going to come out without you saying.
And then I think your credibility is so much better when you don't lead. When you lead with that, I think it's because you're missing something. So you're trying to, puff your chest out right in the beginning, and that's where that humble confidence comes in. Just be really confident who you are, and the rest will take care of itself. And be really good at your job. And I look at where one of the big things that is like a secret sauce for us is going into a room of law enforcement professionals where, the military, they'll respect us for at least give us 30 seconds to establish some credibility, explain what it is that we're doing. So there's that unique aspect that, that we bring to this.
That's a tough crowd though for a military dude. Mm-hmm. Knowing that from being a trainer, what I've realized, and I'm sure you guys have figured this out rather quickly, is I went into that military environment and they don't understand the military. Well, luckily I don't understand law enforcement either.
Yep.
But now that I've been training dudes professionally for quite a few years, I answer their questions before they ask them, and that helps me to establish that credibility. I'm not a cop. I'll never be a cop. Do I understand what they do? Well, I finally can say, yes, I do. But I'm still not a cop, and I'm never going to, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And
being able to say, I understand what you got cooking, and here's why this works in our environment, mm-hmm. and it will work in your environment, because no, we're in the military. That doesn't mean we shoot them all and let God sort them out.
Yeah.
That old T-shirt saying.
Yeah. And we hire a number of retired law enforcement executives, which has helped us speak that language faster. And there's certain things that, words matter. So they were really able to help convert us out of the military. And that's one of the things we do with the individuals that we have transition out, is teach, there's a whole new vocabulary supported by law enforcement. Yeah. So how do I get you speaking that language fast?
So you talked about being unsupervised, being a self-starter, doing the little things right, on time, looking professional. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's just not something I have to worry about from, individuals that we hire coming out of, and law enforcement's the same way. If I say, I need you here at 8 o'clock, I'm not texting you a reminder to be here at 8 o'clock. Now, but we see on the other shop, some of the cartographers, not the full-time employees, but we have an internship program. Some of those, hires have a hard time with that. So, that's, and they work for Ethan. That's not a person you want to be, late lighter out of uniform with.
So it's funny you bring that up. Late lighter out of uniform. I'm actually working on a podcast. I'm going to do a leadership podcast talking about that. How can people not understand that? How can you not understand that you got to be, when they say be here at 08, that means you're here at 08 ready to go. Like
Absolutely.
This morning I said, this dude, if he's alive,
I will be here.
You will be here by 08, one, because there's free chow.
That's the only reason I mostly
Black
came.
Rifle coffee. But I mean, I don't even.
Well, I was sitting around the corner at 7:30 this morning before it was like acceptable, just because you don't know. Like, there's a tractor trailer turned over on the, I need, but you think that way. And to me, that's common sense. It's also respectful of your time, but that's just, if you've done that for 15 years in the military, that's just.
So what do you